Hello and welcome to DigFin VOX, Voices in Digital Finance. I'm your host, James DiBiasio. If you enjoy the program, give us a like and let YouTube know all about it. My guest today is Jack Momose, founder of Degica, a Japan-based gaming company that's turned into a payments platform called Komoju. I spoke with Jack about trends in finance, banking, fintech, gaming, and all with a Japanese twist. Jack Momose from Degica, welcome to DigFin VOX.
Hello, nice to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. So I was interested to have you on the show because we spend our time talking to a lot of people in fintech around the region, and I haven't yet interviewed anybody with a business based in Japan. Big market. There's been some big M&A activity as well over the past 12 months. So maybe introduce us to what's going on in Japan with payments.
Thanks, James. Yeah, we've been in Japan for a long time, and it's never really received so much of attention from players from outside of Japan. I think recently, everyone's heard of the PayPal acquisition of a company called Paydi, which is a domestically created buy now pay later payment method. And I think there's a whole bunch of Google recently acquired another fintech in Japan as well. I think traditionally there's two elements. There's one that in Japan, domestic players are looking outside of Japan as much as they could, but the actual technology deck themselves that they're running on has not been upgraded. So although they see what's actually happening globally, domestically, these traditional players haven't been able to upgrade their services per se. And then at the same time,
when you say that, Jack, are we talking about like the fintech players, or are we also talking about the banks or other,
all of them. So financial services related, either being payments or banking, treasury services, all of that. Especially we're in payments, so we look at the players that we compete with, and we from time to time see still very, very old traditional tech stack that were built 10, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And that was one space. So you have a lot of domestic players traditionally have been dominating the market that haven't really gone out and have a lot of innovation to sort of keep up. And then traditionally also from Japan's point of view, looking from outside into Japan, it's a pretty tight, closed market. Unless you understand Japanese, unless you understand who the players are. And even then, a lot of the rules that internationally we come to have common understanding with don't always apply in Japan because the rules and the laws are written differently. So from that point of view, there's been not a lot of activities, but domestically, Japan as a market is huge. As you all know, there's 120 million people living there, always very high degree of disposable income. E-commerce is blossoming. Logistic services, overnight delivery is anywhere in Japan. So those elements combined make Japan a very attractive marketplace. And now with new players coming in and a lot of the domestic players, so talk about Paydi a little bit, I believe that they are very bilingual. So that sense alone opens up a lot of transparency for somebody who's trying to come into Japan. And I believe that's one of the sort of the kickoff that you're seeing happening in Japan.
And I don't want to spend too much time talking about other companies, but how often do you find companies in fintech that are able to operate on a cross-border manner, whether it's culturally or just in terms of their operational setup?
You'll see a lot of guys like banking companies like Revolut, TransferWise were trying to come into Japan, and inevitably they have to be engaging in compliances and with the legal regulations and so on. We find that as soon as they get clear, through good amount of domestic help, probably through regulation side, they become quickly they can operate. But still, they're not able to operate, with all restrictions off, gloves off, so to speak. So in Europe, they can operate in certain ways, but when it comes to Japan, then somehow they're capped. For example, like some transfer services is only capped to up to 1 million yen, which is only about $10,000 in transfer amount. So in that sense, you can kind of look at it, if it is it a regulation issue or is it a protectionism issue
Right.
domestically in Japan, and you see that with automobile industries as well. And I believe in fintech and banking, it's something that the Japanese government is very well aware of and want to put some restrictions around that.
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about some of the difficulties of operating in Japan as an outsider, but at the same time, what's the innovation scene like? I'm going to date myself here a little bit, but I remember in doing business trips in the late 1990s or early 2000s to Japan, and people on the subway all had smartphones, and I had never seen anything like it. I was amazed by the capabilities of the phones people had, but nobody outside of Japan even seemed to know about this stuff. And then the Apple came up with the iPhone in 2007, and the rest is history. And iPhone's a huge seller in Japan as well. And they sort of lost that what could have been a massive export, but I guess their corporations were not thinking that way. So are there some interesting stories in fintech and payments that are indigenous to Japan that the rest of the world is missing?
Yeah, so we could kind of use the recent payday story to talk about it a little bit. Traditionally, buy now, pay later isn't something that is in Japan. Like they associate it with being a loan. You borrow money and you pay it later, and that usually give a pretty difficult connotation around it. There's other buy now, pay later players in Japan, but they've been, you basically a very intrusive checkout flow where you're about to do the buy now pay later with the other ones and you have to sign this big pledge and give blood to your firstborn, all of that, just so you can finish the transaction. Payday was really the first player that actually came along and shortened that cycle, so that as you're checking out, I think all you really need is a phone number for them to verify you, and then off you go. um, those are the kind of innovations that we're starting to see, not the traditional way of doing a checkout flow or a payment or a business per se, but coming from more client or end user centric point of view. We're starting to see more and more of that coming through, and those innovations are being driven by a lot of startups, and they're good. Startups are always good, but when it comes to big volumes of business, it's still a lot of being controlled by a lot of traditional uh, conglomerates, if you will, bigger companies.
Yeah, the Keiretsu families. Um,
Yep.
what is the environment, just on that point, what's the environment right now for startups and for entrepreneurs in Japan? I mean, when I talk to some people in the venture capital world, they do invest in Japan. There's quite a lot going on in certain sectors. Gaming's a big one, and you have a gaming background. We'll get into that, but in general, when you're looking at the fintech scene, how vibrant is that startup ecosystem now?
It's not easy, to be honest, because of the regulations, the way that they're made. When I talked about it being, maybe slightly somewhere in the protectionism space, Japan has always been, they have a lot of laws, and they have law firms that help them write laws, so the officials get elected, and it's all predicated upon a premise of protecting the consumers. So that's a very big thing in Japan. So a lot of the fintechs, especially the neo banks, come along, hey, we could do this, transfer your money there and that. It's great. It's all a really, really good idea. But at the end of the day, if someone screws up, who's going to hold the bag? And that's where a lot of the regulation stuff will come in. And what we find is some of this fintechs will come around in Japan in startups, unless they're very well backed or they're very well, with right advice on getting regulatory approvals and so on. They can't, and a lot of them actually won't get through the regulatory approval. And so you have a lot of good ideas that people are building, but actually making it to the market, you end up with quite a few, or only a few that actually make it out. And even after they make it out, as a society, consumers are more wary of all things. So to tell somebody that, don't put your banks in Mitsui Sumitomo Bank, but don't put it this bank called something that we've never heard of, and especially if it's run from overseas, or they will check you out, and then you don't get that credibility. It becomes pretty hard.
Right. Okay. Um, let's talk a little bit about Degica, and then we can get into the payment side. But you are you're not a fintech to start with. You were in the gaming and I guess broadly speaking e-commerce. So just give us a little bit of background. What was how did you get your start, and how did you get into becoming a gaming company?
Um, so thanks, Jim. I was a banker actually a long, long time ago. Before I came to Japan, I was a banker in Canada for 5 years. I worked for the Bank of Montreal. Um, I always wanted to get into, fintech or payments and banking. That side of the industry, I find it is something that I, quickly understand. But I'm also a gamer. I play video games all my life, and so when I started my business, when we started Digica, one of the first things to do as a business, we wanted to create cash flow. And the best way to create cash flow than to sell something digital. So one of the first businesses that we engaged in as a company was publishing and selling of video games on the internet. So we figured out quickly how to sell things online, how to figure out how to facilitate downloads, and so on. And that led us to working with Valve, a company out of Seattle who operates a game platform called Steam, fairly quickly. And then once we got there, we understand how Steam works. We figured this was a very good platform, and that it ought to come to Japan. And it was from there that we, had held many meetings with Valve and explained to them that payment is really the way to help them bring something like a Steam, which is a PC gaming platform, to Japan. The initial thought was, of course, from them would be like, well, it's a console country. You got PlayStation, you got, Nintendo. It's all here. Like, what are you talking about for PC gaming? It's a very minor market for them in that sense. But we realized that there's a few ways that we can engage in introducing to domestic Japanese payments that we've figured out ourselves, that it will change consumers' perception on Steam. So the minute that they realize that although the entire UI is still English based or slightly foreign, not quite Japanese looking, and maybe not too many people have heard of Steam in Japan at the time, um, realizing that they can pay at a convenience store like 7-Eleven or Family Mart with cash, and they're going to get this game. That brought up a lot of confidence in the consumers. And what happens with that is, as soon as the consumers are coming in, they're buying, and then Steam's going to see all of a sudden more purchases are coming in from Japan, and that of course trickles down to the publishers and the game developers and studios themselves, and then they're going to see, there's revenues coming out of Japan. They want to get their Japanese product or Japanese versions of their games better and more ready, and then it's no longer a catch 22. It's a collaborative. More revenue, more investment, more revenue. That was the sort of the first stage, and then the second stage, we also wanted Steam to be a valid game distribution platform for Japan, for Japanese studios to sell in Japan. So we call it J on J. And if we could do that, then more Japanese game studios are going to use Steam in Japan to sell in Japan, and that'll further increase Japanese user count.
So you're
So
using
we
payments as a tool not only to bring Steam into Japan, but then also to kickstart an environment in which a local gaming industry was going on PC for local gamers
That's
using
right.
your infrastructure, your payments plumbing.
Yeah, yeah. That's sort of, it's not us. We're just kind of like, there's this, I don't know, there's a word to describe it. Like in some of the mangas or cartoons, you've seen like a giant rock, and then there's like a tiny rock that holds it in place, and then the coyote was running over, and somehow you pulled the little rock away, and this thing kind of moves away. I kind of feel that that's what we did. So just really having that little convenient connection on Steam kickstarted the whole thing. Today, guys like Square Enix or Capcom all see PC gaming as a very important channel, and Japan distribution in Japan is all done on Steam.
Yeah. Okay. You talked about convenience stores, people being able to pay with cash. So we're not really talking about e-commerce at this stage. Is that still the model that is preferred in Japan, or are you also making this something where people can use a credit card or some other, or a wallet of some sort to pay for these things digitally?
Absolutely. Yeah. Credit cards, wallets, lots of different payment methods. The konbini or the convenience store payment is really just one of them.
Mhm.
It's really, I mean, from a pure payment method point of view, as a merchant or as a PSP, it's not the most efficient payment method. You create an order, then it's a pending order, then somebody actually has to go and pay cash, and then that's how you complete the order. There's always a chance that the guy is going to pay. There's always a chance that and so on. But it does a couple of things that I believe are important. One, it associates very clearly from a consumer's mindset. There's a convenience store network, and then there's the product they're about to buy. It gives confidence in that sense, to the product, to the whole buying process, regardless whether or not the end user actually choose that payment method. Um,
Right.
it does that. And the other one is, sometimes in especially if the products are being sold to younger generations that don't have credit cards and not so easy to get wallets,
Mhm.
convenience store payment is a really easy one. You just say yes and you just go and pay your 2,000 yen there.
Yeah. And I guess also, Japan is such an urbanized society, and anyone, foreigners such as myself have been there, would probably realize that there's a Konbini or, a Lawson's or a 7-Eleven or one of these brands like everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
They're absolutely ubiquitous on the street. Every street has one. So it's not really a huge ask
Mm-hmm.
from that perspective. Um,
Not at all, no.
what's the evolution then? Let's talk about from Degica to Komoju.
Thank you. So Digica was a sort of all-in-one. All the businesses that we put together were all just in this one thing. Then we quickly realized, as our payment business is growing, in 2016, we actually officially launched our payments deck to payment services, and it's called Komoju. So the company is still called Degica. Komoju is the name of the payment platform and the name of the service that we operate. A little bit like Valve and Steam, so to speak. We realized that when we launched Komoju Payments, the first customer we launched it on was on Steam. And there was only a handful of other companies, but nobody as big a scale as Steam at the time. And we continued to improve our service and our platform. In 2016, we launched with Shopify. So as Shopify was trying to come into Japan to become a payment e-commerce platform, it's another one of the really advanced e-commerce system coming into Japan, which is full of players that are very archaic and with dated technology service offers. Shopify needed something to kind of kickstart that, and then again we did that as well. So being able to help merchants come sign up on Shopify and being able to sell in Japan using, and of course if they're going to sell in Japan, they're going to need Japanese payments. Being able to complete that whole loop for Shopify and merchants that are coming in on Shopify was a really important step. And so that helped us upgrade our entire operations as a payment company. So from sign up for onboarding of merchants, payouts, to reconciliations, to adding more payment methods and so on. And of course, as volume grow, we can lower our prices. So our merchants can now sign up with us at a much lower price than they would with our competitors. Today, merchants can sign up, and within 5 minutes of submitting their documents, their payments are ready to go.
Yeah. What's the size of the business now? Can you give us some stats in terms of the volumes that you process and also just, the health of the business right now?
I can't say exactly, but I could say, year over year, we're at about 40% growth. And last year, I think we're close to about $1 billion in transaction volume.
Are you a VC-backed company, privately owned?
Uh,
What's the structure for you guys?
we are 100% bootstrapped, so there's
Mhm.
no VC. It's all
Right.
domestic, internal. Only myself and a handful of Digica employees hold the shares.
Okay, that's great. And what will be the next leap for you? I know we've talked in the past about some international work that you're working on now, but are you going to need external capital, or can you keep this with you and your other partners the whole way?
Um, the next step for us is so we've actually silently launched global payments. So today, as you sign up on Komoju, it's on komoju.com. If you sign up, as you finish your sign up process, there's a place where you could get to select the number of payments or the payment methods that you want, and we have all the global payments available there, not just Japanese ones, but Korean ones, and European ones, South American ones, all of those, and you just have to check off, and you can get through that. That's, I believe, would put us in the right place where we become being a company based in Japan but still providing global payment services to all merchants, not just in Japan but globally. That's our goal. um, in the next phase, we are likely going to look at fundraise for a couple of reasons, not because we need money. We've been profitable year over year, but I think it's important to raise the general standard and the what's the word, the bar, so to speak, that we want to measure or get ourselves against.
It's a
That's one.
reputational thing,
That's
more than.
right.
Mhm.
It raises that. And the second thing is, as we I think we were one of the first companies in Japan to be able to do what the payouts on T+7. So we're T+7 today with no, a lot of companies in Japan will do that, but they'll charge you a fee for it. We have no fees. It's our standard payout is T+7. We want to move that to T+1. So that is our the next internal operational goal. So
Right.
T+1 just means your transaction finished today, you get your money tomorrow.
Yeah. Why is it T+7 strikes me for a domestic system as kind of slow? Am I right about that? Or,
No,
what's the
no.
barrier? No.
Traditionally in Japan, you have so you close at the end of the month. So
Mhm.
let's say we're in February. So your entire February sales is closed at the end of February, and you get your money end of March.
Okay.
So could it be up to T+60 at some point?
Okay.
Yeah.
And how does that compare to internationally as you're doing business in places like Europe or other parts of Asia?
Yeah, so other parts of Asia, I think T+7 is pretty good. In Japan, T+7 is pretty fast. That means we close this week and you get your money at the end of next week. Um, in Europe, no. Europe is at T+1, and I think in the US, depending on states, depending on the service, sometimes they're T+7. I think is somewhere there, but T+1, I believe, is important. As long as we have our operations, so AML checks and fraudulence and all of that checks and balances operationally in place, go to T+1. It's better for the merchants. It's better for us. Uh, that's what we plan to do.
Yeah. What are some of the big trends that you're riding? So, for example, buy now, pay later. You referenced that earlier. That's obviously a hot trend in payments. What's your take on that? Is that something that in the Japanese context is as interesting as it is in other markets, or is there something else that drives the trends?
Um, I don't believe, to be honest, buy now, pay later. If you just say to a Japanese consumer, "Hey, buy now, pay later," they first interaction would be like, no, what's in it? It's like, what's the trap? What's the, So I don't believe that it has the same connotation as somewhere like in other countries. I think in Japan, buy now, pay later, as long as it's framed around convenience.
Mhm.
Um, and then framed around a few. I think it's it'll be well received as long as consumers know that they're not going to get screwed for 20% interest rate, or yakuza come knocking on the doors 3 months later and so on. So that's a really important part to how to position the buy now pay later. Um, the the other thing is, for a lot of the new players coming out on buy now pay later, it's around you know uh, built it. If you built it, they will come. So if you built it, the merchants will come. Well, they don't always come. So again, merchants, depending on what that arrangement looks like between the buy now pay later provider and the merchants, and of course the fees, uh, that'll dramatically change how the services get rolled out.
Okay. As you expand internationally, not just from Japan to other markets, but also, other market to other market business. So no, not necessarily with a Japanese client at all. What are going to be one or two challenges, and what do you need to do to reach that?
Um, I think reputationally is one. So today, if we look at our people that we're trying to catch, guys like Stripe, So if you're a company based in Latin America and you want to do payments in Europe, and if Stripe's available, you're not going to hesitate whether or not this company is American or not. We need to get ourselves there, and that's from the level of our products, the level of our services. All of that needs to get upgraded, and of course the reputational, challenge that we have to go after, try and get big and famous in some way.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
And last, I want to ask you, you have a background that combines gaming, payments, technology.
Mhm.
We hear a lot about tokenization, NFTs, crypto. What's your take? As you know, you're doing bread and butter payments. Is this something that's going to seep into your world, or is that a different universe?
I believe they're very different. I think NFTs, there's a lot of hypes. NFTs, somebody somehow had a digital image and it sold for $6 million. You hear sensational stories like that. I don't believe that I don't believe it's going to go away. I think that the technology itself, being able to uniquely identify a particular digital asset and say, hey, this is always traced down to through blockchain and all, that's great. That's indexing. And that happens before. Whether or not that actually, your regular Joes like you and I can actually benefit from something like that, I think it will take some time. And I think if we are going to benefit from it, unless you and I have come up with this most viral image that we painted on Tuesday morning, we're going to benefit it from the implementations of these technologies, and not so much as the sensational story like, look, this picture of the dog that I just posted and it's $3 million. Because of that, and why do we, my guess, but sometimes you see a lot of these 3 million images are sold out and all of that. There's probably a lot of risks associated with those particular transactions. Either be, where's the source of fund? Why does somebody want to pay $6 million for this particular image? And what if someone else has a claim over this image? So I think that industry itself has a lot of time. It needs a lot of time to kind of sort itself out until it's safe enough for regular Joes like you and I. So we're going to take a sort of a watch and learn approach to this, and not have anyone go, hey, you want to accept Bitcoin tomorrow? Yeah, that game's been played a while.
Yes. And from the gaming point of view, we hear a lot about whether it's metaverse or virtual worlds, whatever names you want to put on these things. But certainly a lot of financial institutions are looking at gamification, Robinhood brokerage or whatever it might be. As somebody coming from the gaming world, what about that excites you, and what about that gives you pause?
I think of the one thing, gaming, the most important part about gaming is how fun is it to play that game. That's the most important part. If the game itself is not fun, but it's full of all this, ways to, play and earn money or pay money, then it's a lot of like the old games on the Japanese flip phones. All you do is just click, and hopefully you win something. That's not fun.
Or something.
Yeah. So those are not fun. And so I think in the gaming perspective, we want to first of all look at the game itself. Is it fun? Do people want to play this? Are they actually having fun, or are they always triggered and really, really mad after they're done? That's kind of how we see it. I think the payment piece, when it comes to gaming industry per se, the game industry per se, we have one job: just lower that buying friction. I don't want to be stopping in the middle of my game, running out of bullets, and I have to run out and get some bullets and come back. Just as an example. So game is game. Payment is the one to assist in that transaction in some way or another, but it's not the one that should be dominating any sort of the gaming piece.
Right. Okay. So gaming is it's an enjoyment.
That's right.
And the payment, in your view, should be the service provider that enables the gaming, not the other way around.
That's right. That's
okay, right. Great. Jack Momose, thank you so much for joining us on DigFin, and appreciate learning about Japan and payments and your business, and good luck with it.
Thank you very much.